Hello, this is Super Ray 64 because my opinion is just that interesting. I wanted to really quickly and very sloppily run over some stupid questions and things that I hear about evolution. Questions I hear about evolution mainly from creationists. I was watching Aron Ra and Kent Hovind's debate they had, I think, about a month ago. And it was really, really frustrating because, as Aron Ra points out, these things that Kent Hovind says are inaccurate representations of evolution. And even if Kent Hovind doesn't agree with this model, it's a stupid, dishonest tactic from a very dishonest human being to claim things about the model that aren't true. If I were to say creationism is garbage because, it says that pixies made the flood, and that's not true because pixies don't exist. Yeah, that's not an accurate representation of a model that they posit, even though I disagree with it. One of the things that Kent Hovind said, and he always asks, like, can a dog evolve into, like, a dog that's the size of Texas or whatever? And it was kind of frustrating that Aron Ra never really addressed that. The answer is basic if, once again, you give a damn about the way evolution works. Because an idea of evolution that I don't hear stressed well enough is the concept that evolution is a reflexive phenomenon, in that populations of organisms respond to environments. They work themselves into a niche when it comes to an environment. And the reason why populations of animals over generations never evolved to being the size of Texas is because, for multiple factors, because an organism that big couldn't survive at all, because an organism that big would require way too many resources. That size is a huge strain on an organism's ability to live. I think it's either like ASAP Science or Vsauce did this great video talking about the biology of Godzilla, how it's essentially impossible. Of course, leading up to that point, all the organisms, all the ancestors of that initial organism, if it was like Godzilla size, would also have the hurdles of being a giant organism in an environment that doesn't support animals that big. Yeah, 65 million years ago we had dinosaurs, and they had a monopoly on their environment. That's why we needed an extinction level event killing them all off in order for smaller organisms like us, mammals, anything like us, to survive. But an organism that big is not impossible, but like I said, an organism has to be able to fit its ecological niche. And an organism like that, all the incremental biological steps leading up to that would be essentially impossible because of the amount of strain it requires. So it's a dishonest question that doesn't take into account the factors of evolution, because people like Kent Hovind, most creationists, they think that evolution is just something proactive, like almost like Lamarckian genetics. Not in the way that an organism's DNA code can be changed by things that it experiences in its life, like if an organism is exposed to radiation and things like that, and events like that, modifying its genetic code, and that will have the potential of changing the way its descendants are born. But other than that, it comes from this misunderstanding that organisms almost will themselves into being, into evolving. That felt like a huge tangent. I apologize. The point being is that an organism can't get that big. Well, is unlikely to get that big, mainly because its ecological niche will not allow it. Another stupid question I hear, and I think he brought this up too, is this concept of why do, trying to word this better, the idea of macro versus microevolution, because they're the same thing. Microevolution is just modifications to one species, and macroevolution is when a species becomes a new species. That does not mean that a whale turns into a dog, okay? Or sometime down the line, a cat will have descendants that become an emu. That's not it. Once again, evolution is reflexive. It's something it's a model that we use to analyze what's already happened and to predict what might happen. All the animals that we have are already animals. Okay, a new species that emerges down the road, if two populations of lizards are separated due to a mountain range, and both of them experience speciation in that they can't breed with their ancestor species, it's not going to give birth to something we've already have. It's like in the case of mammals like bats. Yeah, they might develop a trait that's similar to another entirely different animal, like birds and bats both having wings, but it's not going to be the same thing we already have. So macroevolution is just changes that put genetic barriers between two different species. And the question that they never address, and a question that I really wish more science advocates would posit to them, is what is the upward bounds of evolution to them? Because macroevolution is the population over time gaining so many different genetic differentiations at a genetic level that they develop new species in that population. And that population becomes a new species, and they can no longer breed with their essentially their cousin species, like us and apes, things like that. What is the upward bounds when it comes to genetic diversity? Because if you add enough changes on a genetic level, that being the genotype, it's going to express itself in the phenotype, and that's going to lead to drastic changes. So what's the upward bounds? And there is none. There is no upward bounds when it comes to how many small changes you can add to an organism, add to a population over time, that eventually will lead to macroevolution. So one is connected to the other. And this magic upward bounds that they put on it, that, a dog can get extra fur, and a dog can get taller, a dog can get longer, a dog can get a shorter snout, but it can't change into a new type of species. Yeah, it can. And depending on the economic niche that population finds itself in, it's going to. Because eventually, yes, longer snout, shorter legs, thicker fur. Eventually, though, over time, the population is going to be not unrecognizable, but genetically very, very different. And that's macroevolution. So these questions that they ask they're frustrating because they're either liars, like I honestly think people like Ray Comfort might be, or they don't care about representing these scientific models accurately, because they've already established in their brain that they're lies and they're deceitful, and it's frustrating because they're incapable of developing better arguments. Kent, I'm looking out for you. You got to develop better arguments, brother, and hopefully in the future more science advocates will be able to answer their questions from these people's perspective. I have the benefit of formerly being a creationist, and then I actually learned what the scientific model taught, what it was, and I realized, oh, well, I've been lied to all my life, so I changed my mind. So yeah, no upward bounds. It's a reflective phenomenon. Consider that before asking another stupid-ass question. This is Super Ray 64 signing out. I will see you next time.